Everyone. My name is Maria Henson, and I am your host for today's webinar presented to you by the Southeast chapter of the Travel and Tourism Research Association, otherwise known as CETRA. I think we're going to have an engaging discussion, and the word engaging is important for today. We're trying to do something a little different. This is not meant to be a webinar where you all sit quietly for an hour listening to a speaker talk to a big black box alone in the vacuum of online space. We're really hoping to turn this a little bit more in a workshop than just a webinar. And to make that a workshop is really allowing, and we're hoping that you will engage. We have chat enabled, Q&A enabled, and in fact, if you are on right now, I see a few names that I recognize. If you want to pop in and chat and introduce yourself, tell us where you're joining us from while I'm doing the introduction, let's get the conversation going. The plan is for the speaker, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, is to really go through her delivery, and as she's going through, she'll probably pause and give you some moment to ask questions, and please feel free to pop questions in. We want to make sure that you're walking away with something meaningful today. Speaking of meaningful, the topic of today's session is meaningful AI from chat windows to work and workflows. And what, I don't know about you guys, but for myself, meaningful was the part that has been missing in a lot of artificial intelligence conversations that we've been having really over the last however many years now. And I really am hoping that today we can bring that meaningful piece to you. So I would like to introduce our fantastic speaker for today, our workshop leader for today, Janette Roush. She is a Chief AI Officer and SVP of Innovation for Brand USA. Janette's been around the block a few times. She's been in the insight space and travel and tourism space for a while, but what is really setting her apart from others, in my mind, is her ability to really deliver things that sometimes can be overwhelming and complicated in a way that's relatable. And I also am admiring her for the fact that she was one of the first curious and brave to jump on the artificial intelligence bandwagon and really make it her own and engage and embrace. But the other thing that's important about her is that she's willing to share that knowledge. So for those of us who may be just as curious, but maybe less brave, like myself, I would love for Janette to really take us through and help us hopefully get more intelligent and get some more meaning from AI and what it really means for us in professional and personal lives, maybe. All right, Janette, take away.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm thrilled to be here. And I will say, I will show a couple of slides just to set this up, but really, I'm just going to walk you through some things that I've built and like how I am currently doing my work. Uh, because we're at a moment in the development of AI where it is no longer just a chatbot that sits in the corner of your screen, right? And you go over every once in a while when you have a question to ask, or you need to rewrite an email to sound a little bit more polite. We're a little bit out of that moment of AI now. So if anyone here has set up an open Claw, or if you are using Claude code inside of the terminal, please pop that into the chat because I would love to know where everybody is at really on your AI journey. Also, if you could put into the chat the tools that you currently have access to, through your job or tools that you're paying for separately personally, that will really help me as well because I want to make sure that I keep this conversation like geared at the level that will be meaningful for you. I don't want this to feel like yet another entry level AI presentation. I think that that's becoming kind of a challenge in the industry right now, where every single time you go to a meeting, people are like, okay, well, before you can understand AI, let me tell you what machine learning is. Like, we're past that now. Let's talk about how AI is now actually able to do meaningful work for us. And I love that we have some folks exploring Claude and Claude co-work. Claude is where we are moving at Brand USA. Like kind of leaving ChatGPT behind, I use Claude Code inside of VS Code, and that's the setup I'm going to share with you today. I'm working with, not everybody at Brand USA gets to spend all day playing with AI like I do. So many folks co-work, and Claude inside of the desktop app becomes a more user-friendly way of using these tools. So I'll kind of walk through all of that. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I want to make sure I can still see the chat window. Great. So just if you're not familiar with Brand USA, we are the destination marketing organization for the United States. So our role is driving the international inbound travel and tourism to the United States to capture those economic benefits of visitor dollars. My role at Brand USA as the Chief AI Officer is to lead global destination marketing into the AI era. We want to use intelligent systems to connect the world to the story, people, and places of the United States by making discovery personal, inspiration effortless, and travel decisions frictionless. And I am doing that through three different methods. So the first is internal. That's the operational excellence. So how can I work with the Brand USA staff to make sure that we are taking advantage of everything that AI has to offer right now? The second piece is industry empowerment. So that's part of why I'm here today. And I also say I love the TTRA community. I've attended the global conference or the national conference a couple of times, thanks to Donna Karen from when I was at New York City Tourism, and she brought me along. And I really love and respect the way that members of this industry and this organization are so open and so generous with your knowledge. And I've really enjoyed that with your group. And then the third piece that I want to accomplish at Brand USA is enhancing the experiences that the travelers have when they are discovering or booking the United States. So that's coming to life through external tools like our partnership with Mindtrip that we have on what is the website? It's visittheusa.com and americathebeautiful.com. So those now both point to an experience that has Mindtrip, which is an itinerary planner, kind of integrated throughout it. So now I'm going to minimize out of this and show you what my current work setup looks like, which is here inside of a tool that is called VS Code. So it's a coding terminal, which can feel a little bit threatening, right? I was a theater major, so I was never heavily engaged in code. Maria, did you want to jump in with something?
I just wanted to say that when I see this, it gives me high blood pressure and anxiety, and I don't know how others feel. I mean, there's some people on the list that I see right now that are very robust, I think, in the AI space. And I just want you to, yes, talk us through that. It's okay. You do not need to run off and take, Xanax to sit through
No.
the session. That this is manageable, this is doable, this is attainable.
Hmm. And I'll say what I like about this, even though I am not a coder, right? I don't know how, like, I learned maybe a tiny bit of HTML back when I was writing a newsletter for Broadway.com in like 2000, but that is the extent of my coding experience. And that's what I think is so powerful, because this can now write JSON code in Python that I think is useful for the research community. I'll say, like, my connection to the research community is that in my previous life, I worked on Broadway for 20 years. And 8 of those years, I was the head of insights at an ad agency for Broadway shows. So we were trying to connect the ad spend that we would do to which tickets we were selling for which performances at which parts of the house. And I was also doing revenue management, so changing the prices of these tickets in order to maximize the revenue on Broadway. One of the things that I did when I was at this agency was start a research arm so that instead of paying $20,000 a pop to do artwork testing for a pitch, we had a panel of 10,000 theater lovers, mostly from the New York tri-state area, who are really, really happy. Like, talk about easy research to do. Theater fans love to give you their opinions on Broadway shows. But what I learned doing all of this is without being able to code in Python, like my ability to crunch information was really limited. And so I hired people who knew how to do that. And then I felt very out of touch because I didn't know how to check their work. I didn't know how to keep up with what they were doing. If they were out sick for a day, then I need to troubleshoot something if it breaks, and I didn't know how to do that. So that's literally what got me excited about AI initially, is I was doing marketing at New York City Tourism. I was, out of the Broadway game, but I saw these tools. I'm like, someday that this will be able to do the stuff that was so impossible for me to figure out when I was at AKA. And like now I get to figure out some of that stuff. So I'll walk through this actual setup in a little bit. What I want to start with is a research focused project that I was able to work on inside of this system. And if I can find the actual chat, you see over here, these are just different conversations that I am having with Claude. So it's just like you're using Claude or honestly Chat GPT or Gemini inside of a browser, except you can click back and forth between different conversations, just like browser tabs, essentially. And here we have a research hub project. So we had a interesting conversation. I was talking to Chelsea Benitez, our head of research, who I'm sure most of you know, and she was spending a lot of time going through crosstabs from a report that, like a study that MMGY does for us every year. And I will show you that quickly. Yeah. So here's the crosstabs. It's for me, I look at this and I'm like, Chris thinks that the other setup is scary. Like, I think this is scary. I know vaguely what a crosstab is and how to read it, but I don't want to get into this. And this is something that every time one of our agency partners wanted to understand, what's the difference between South Korea and France when it comes to, things that travelers want to do in the destination, Chelsea would have to stop everything that she was doing and pull up this spreadsheet and get the answer for them. And it gets clunky and it gets slow. So we were talking about what if we could build a tool that takes advantage of AI in order to have an interface to answer these questions. And so I will say I came over here, and it won't be in this chat because, as you can see, the conversation compacted at a certain point. So it kind of smushed everything we were talking about together in order to free up room in its context window, which is, a context window, if you're not familiar with that, it's just how much information can the AI hold in its little AI brain at one time. And just like with humans, it runs out of space. And that keeps improving. But back when I was first doing this project, the amount of information it could keep in its brain at one time was much smaller than what it is today, because I did this probably 4 months ago.
And Janette, just quick touch on this. For those who do not use Claude maybe all the time, you are using a paid version of Claude. Is that correct, to do the analysis that you're using? Could you share
Yes.
which subscription you have?
So I actually have the Max subscription. So Claude, and I will say the major models that everybody is mentioning in the chat, they all offer some form of a team or enterprise subscription model. And typically, if you are an individual user who pays for a year at a time, it comes out to $20 a month. If you are a team user, if you're part of an enterprise, where the head of your technology team is purchasing the solution on behalf of your company, if they're paying on a monthly basis, it's typically $30 a month. So it is not, or $30 a person a month. It is not an enormous investment. And I'd say at this point, like it's 2026. I'd say for any organization, it is table stakes at this point to provide these tools. And you can all tell your bosses that I said so. And if you do not have access to a paid tool at your organization, you can tell your boss to give me a call and I'll have a conversation with them about it. Because if you don't have that, you don't necessarily have the ability to turn off training the model on your inputs. And that means anything that you put into the tool, it will save and it will use to train future models of that tool. And from a, privacy and data protection standpoint, like that's a nightmare. We don't want that. And also, if you were to leave an organization and let's say you're using your own private tools, and that's the experience I'd had in the past, or like, well, we don't want to make a policy because then that's putting that's making a stand one way or another, and we're not ready to do that yet. So if people have their own tools, don't ask, don't tell. Well, that's a problem because if you leave your company now, you don't get to keep your email. You don't get to keep access to the server. So why would you get to keep access to all of the information you would have ever uploaded into your personal AI tool? Like, it creates a lot of risks that I don't think make sense.
That's
So
an excellent point. Yeah.
yeah, like this has been around 3.5 years. It's not new. It's the future of business. Like, truly, the reason I'm going to walk you through this, I was just doing a keynote on this yesterday. Like, AI is becoming the operating system for how business is going to get done. And that's everything that Anthropic is doing, which is the maker of Claude. They are creating an enterprise ready solution so that eventually, when you open up this tool, you will never leave this tool. Like when I sit down in the morning to do work, I open up a new chat and I type in today, and it is connected to Rike, which is our project management software. It can see, like, kind of through a workaround, it can see my sent in my inbox, like for my emails. It can look at my calendar and see what meetings I have and write a summary of what do I need to do in order to get ready for those meetings. Uh, like I expect at this point, all incoming information, I don't want to get a spreadsheet that I upload to Claude. Really, I want that accessible via an API that is then connected to and feeding my instance of Claude with the information that I need to do my job. So, from a research standpoint, like that's a very different way of thinking about doing your work, but it's also like you're going to be at the center of those changes because so much of what you do is reliant on data, right? And that kind of inbound feed of data. So setting up safe, secure systems to do that analysis is going to become important. And I've had this conversation in the past with research folks. I'm curious if this is still the way researchers are thinking about this, where, like in the past, when you talk about AI, you say, oh, well, it's terrible at math, it hallucinates numbers, we could never trust it. Is anybody moving towards the world where instead of just asking, oh, look, I have a webinar at 10 a.m. today. Thank you, Claude. And a lot of overdue tasks because I've been away from my computer all week. And I'll open up the actual agenda so that you can see it. But the way that we can do our work in these tools now, it's not about like you don't just ask questions of the data necessarily. You ask it to write Python scripts, just like you, if you know how to code, would write that Python script yourself. And then you run the repeatable Python script on the data so that you get the same answer every single time that you do it. It's using the generative system, which is generative AI, to create a deterministic way of getting an answer from your data. So which is the code that's now much easier to write than it would have been 10 years ago. So like, I would love to, like in the chat, let us know, is that the way you are starting to work with data and AI?
Yeah, I think we're starting to get there, but it's definitely, I think we're Ian's behind, at least where I'm at right now. So curious. I know I have 17 of you on the call. Pop in something. It doesn't have to be descriptive, just share your thoughts on that. Be great.
And then here you can see I have my to-do list for the day, which includes so many overdue things. So everything that I need to do inside of Reich. And here we have my prep document for the webinar today and what I need to prepare for, for future speaking engagements. So this is now, instead of me keeping 100 different, let me close out of that too. Like, I used to take notes during meetings, and wherever I was, I would have a different post-it note in different places, right, to track everything that I need to do. That now all happens in this system and gets organized in this system. And when it gets a little out of control, like it feels like it is for me right now because I've been at a conference, I'm gonna have to come back in and say, help me get this under control again. And it's not just me rearranging post-it notes. The AI will talk me through that system.
I definitely still live in the 78 notebooks. My team laughs at me yet. So
Yeah. So I've completely moved out of that, which has been a game changer for me. Uh, so
so I
I'm gonna go.
interrupted you. You were talking about the tables, and I kind of took you into
Yes.
onto the squirrel thing. So yeah.
So to go back to the tables, I came over here into this exact conversation and I'm like, here's a challenge that I have. How would you propose solving this challenge so that it's easier for Chelsea to find this information to share with their agencies, or maybe create a tool that the agencies can use themselves to access the information in the crosstabs? And what it ended up doing was going through, it's like, oh, I share this spreadsheet with me. Okay, I see that it's a number of crosstabs from this MMGY, study that you've commissioned. I can't really read it in that format because what AI wants to read is something that looks like this. So it wrote a Python script that took every single crosstab and it turned it into, here we have T1 is the ID for each question. And it takes all of that information that has been formatted in the crosstabs and it unformats it. So here, and I know this is pretty small, but I'm sure you've seen things like this before. So every single line of information now lives as one row in the spreadsheet. And you can see it's enormous. It's 32,000 rows of information about 118 different questions in the crosstabs. So it was either JSON or Python in order to scrub that data and turn it into something it can actually read.
And so what you're saying is the input for that transformation was the original data tables that Chelsea had. Okay.
Yes, which was already formatted. And I'd say when you're working with data, the less formatting you have on it, the better, because for AI to work with it, it's going to strip all of that formatting out again. Because if AI is writing code to analyze data, it needs, header table, and it needs, the first column to be identifiers. So any formatting, any blank rows, it doesn't know what that means. So you need the data just to be as simple and as, CSV file like as possible to do this work. So then it went through and it, knew the bases for how many people answered each of the questions. And it put that into its own table. And then it made a guide for itself. I can pull that over, which tells the AI exactly what each question is, and what the bases, like what N was and how many responses did each get. And you can see here it goes through all 118 questions. So this becomes the key, the answer key for when you put a question into the tool that we built. It knows by looking at these different tools, okay, this is what I use in order to answer the questions. And then it made an interface for it. So this has a little bit of AI attached because you are able to put in any question that you have, and it's set up with a Claude token through the Claude API in order to take your natural language and see if there is an answer in the database that would be applicable for what you are asking. And then here we have some sample questions. It might take a second because this system, which is called on render, it takes a second for it to actually render the database in the background. Oh, it locked me out.
So how did you merge the output and the pretty much analytics that Claude wrote behind the scenes with the on render?
I let the AI tell me what to do.
Okay.
So here, and I wish that it still had that earlier part of the conversation. Let's see what all it says. Oh, let me chronologically analyze the conversation. Oh, but it still doesn't go. So I think it must have run out of context a couple of times. It was a very long conversation to figure out what is the best way to set this up where it is still completely factual. And so at this point in the conversation, it's like, this is why we need to have an API key and where we will put the API key. All right, and here we have the answer. So my biggest concern with this is that we want to make sure that this tool isn't hallucinating, right? We want to make sure that the answers are factual. So I was testing a number of different things and then finding errors and then working with the AI chat to say, okay, why am I getting this error? Why is this happening? How can we have a proof in the actual tool itself? So you see, it's going to make this nice chart. But then down here, every time you ask a question, it pulls up the actual source data. So it is rendering what is in the spreadsheet, which then also would make it easy if I wanted to go back into the crosstabs and confirm that this is actually looking at the data correctly. I'm able to do that. And so for me, having that proof point to easily double check the work, that was the most important part of creating this tool. But I started off just by saying, walk me through, like, is what I am looking for possible? And it's like, yes, I need to take all of your data out of crosstabs, and it needs to be one question per line, even if it means that we have 38,000 lines, because that's how I will read the information. I need to make a key so I know what each question is, and I'm going to put that in this text file. And then I'm going to need you to build it into a visual data, into a visual interface. And here are 3 different ways we could do that. And we talked about what are the benefits of each different version. We decided on render would be the best way to do it, even though it's a little bit slow, because as you saw, I had to wait for the website to spin up because it's not live all the time. So it needs to go and pull in the information. And then once it pulls in the information, all 38,000 rows of data, then it is ready to answer a question.
It's funny to me how you were saying we looked at options and we decided to go with that solution when part of we is really Claude and the artificial intelligence that's having a conversation with you.
Yeah. And that is truly how I think about it, because I mean, it's still my work. if it's wrong, I don't get to blame AI for it. We, as the humans, you have to take ownership for the output. And I know from a research perspective, right? Like that's scary because that's you have your entire company and industry absolutely depending on what you say being completely correct. And I can only imagine like how difficult or embarrassing that would be if something's wrong. I'm sure there's a lot of fear around that. Uh, and you don't get to blame the AI if something's
Right.
wrong. It's you, right? It's you as the researcher. So
So how long did this process take from the initial conversation of ideation of whether this can even happen to you having this visualization tool that now lives in, and I don't know, did you guys make it public or is this still purely internal for the insights team to kind of pull the request and then deliver to your members?
yeah, totally internal right now.
Okay.
So it's a tool so that when Chelsea gets questions from our agencies, she is able to answer those questions more quickly. And it's also that's helpful because Chelsea's already very familiar with the underlying information. So that makes it easier for her to gut check if an answer is right or not. And I'd say the process, it probably took I'd say very much on and off over the course, like 2 days after I started it, I had this finished product, but it wasn't like I'm working on it the whole time. It's like as you get used to working in AI, like what I like about this setup is that you can bounce back and forth between conversations and you can start something working. Something might write a code script for 20 minutes. And if you are in, like the desktop version of AI, like here, this is from a webinar that I was doing on Monday. Uh, it's harder to flip around between different conversations. You're just kind of sitting and twiddling your thumbs waiting. Whereas it feels a little bit more intuitive in this setup. There's less going back and then checking back in again. You can just scroll across the top. And if you see a little dot, you know that the conversation is waiting for you to come back into it. So
Okay.
I could work on this project like if I'm, on an internal call, I can, sit and type some instructions to it and then go back to whatever the conversation I'm having, on Zoom. Because I have to confess, I'm terrible with my multitasking. I'm always multitasking. And I know I shouldn't, but I do.
Well, so Jeanette, question for you. This came up in the conversation from Wes Watkins, and one of the questions that he asked was, so if we are all in Simple View database as DMOs, a lot of us are using that as a CRM, would it be possible to create this type of API connectivity with Simple View and use Claude Code or Claude environment to generate reporting like this?
So I don't know what the terms of service are with Simple View.
But
So they
technically,
technically, absolutely. Technically, you can create an MCP server that knows what your login credentials are and can then bring in that information. Now, and I don't really like we use Simple View at New York City, so I'm very familiar with Simple View, but not on a technical level.
mhm.
So if they had like, do they have any APIs?
I know that, and the team on the phone, feel free to jump in and
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that we do definitely have connections. I know that we work with tourism economics on some of the visualization, so I know there's some relationship that exists. Obviously, could it be limited or not, but definitely something to explore. But the point is that the MCP can be established from the CRM to
Yeah.
build out this type of automation and build some of these incredible, simple to read dashboards.
So this would be, if it's going to work, we'll see if the credentials are in here and it can find it because I haven't done this for a while. So I have, yeah, a Whoop band and which is, a fitness tracker. And at some point, oh, it wants me to restart Claude to do that, and I'm not going to do that. Well, let's see. sometimes it wants you, when you are opening up a new MCP server, it wants you to completely close down what you are working on and then reopen the whole thing. No, I don't want it to do all of that right now. But Whoop doesn't have an official MCP server. It has what somebody who is a fan of Whoop just went and built one. And then you can find it if you go to GitHub. And I'd be a little curious if you went to GitHub, if somebody has already created an unofficial MCP server for SimpleView. And that just means it's not supported by the company, but it gives your AI tool instructions for how to put in your login credentials and then access SimpleView that way. And right, yeah, just like Wes said, you just have to spin up that
Mhm.
MCP server to make it work with Claude. And Claude will tell you how to do that. But I'll set up a research. Can you research GitHub and see if there's a MCP server for SimpleView? And now I'm breaking my own rules. I'm really trying to remember to use voice when I am communicating with Claude. I have a tool called Monologue, but tools like Whisperflow are also very popular. And you will just give more context to these tools if you get used to talking to them instead of typing to them. So we'll let that cook a little bit and see if it can pull up something that somebody has already made. Because I tell you what, I would do it for you, except like we use
No,
Salesforce.
right,
So I don't even have any access to SimpleView
right.
anymore. And certainly it's something I think people should be asking SimpleView for, because Salesforce, we are now starting a limited test of, they now have, I think they're calling it a headless API or something like that. Oh,
So
let's
Jeanette,
see.
quick question, and I know we're trying to make this more like hands-on. This is how you code, this is how you do instruction, these are the pages you go
Hmm.
to and such. But where does, for Brain USA and all the work that you've been doing and all this engagement with, looks like Claude is your kind of preferred or predominant LLM or agent that you're using. Where does the ownership of AI live in your organization? So I know that you, because you're not IT, right? You are on the intelligence and data side.
So I am now the technology team now reports into me, which is, I made the mistake. I mentioned this to my brother at some point, who's an engineer, like in the defense contracting industry in Colorado. And I said something about I'm in charge of IT. And he's like, oh God, why would they do that? Like, that doesn't make, you can't just, and I'm like, wait, no, I said that wrong. I'm wrong. I'm sorry. They just report into me. I don't know anything about IT. Like, I'm not doing the IT work. But what that's done for our organization is now, like, yes, I am the owner of rolling out AI in the organization, but the technology team is super excited to help make that happen and to engage with me on that. So if you are using kind of standard like Claude on the desktop yourself, if I come over to my settings, I think over here, when we find the skills that Brand USA has, you see here we have a number of organization skills. And the very best one that we have here is building a PowerPoint. Like, this is something that is a pain point, I am sure, for every single organization. And what, so our director of IT now owns rolling out skills across the organization. So a skill in Claude, it's just a pre-written prompt. But that prompt has the ability to to use tools. So it's a little bit, if you're familiar with a custom GPT inside of ChatGPT, it's more powerful and more useful than that. But you can see the prompt, like if I put it into code view, this is the literal prompt. But and then you can also view it right in a kind of nicer, more human friendly version. So Kat and the technology team, She keeps up with, because this is based on a PowerPoint writing skill that Claude already has, that Anthropic has created. And so she keeps track of when that skill gets updated, which then gives something that she can update for this skill. So, and you see here, she maintains a change log. So you know the last time that she made an update to it and what she exactly did to make those updates. And then you have to be an admin on the Claude account in order to roll out a skill for your whole organization. So she is the gatekeeper for what skills we do that with, and then making sure we are maintaining those skills. Because what you don't want is a graveyard of outdated things that nobody uses, and you don't understand, oh, is this the right PowerPoint skill or is that the right PowerPoint skill? So Cat maintains this for the organization. And it means anything that we do in AI, the technology team is raising their hands to be the ones to help roll that out. So some of you may know IPW is taking place next week. And we are going to roll
Cool.
out, yeah. So big leisure trade show. So your leisure teams, if you're a DMO, will be heading to Fort Lauderdale to do business meetings all week. So the IT team, is identified that the transcription tool that we want to use for these meetings is called Granola. And so they are in the process of helping everybody in sales download Granola. It's an app on your phone and also works on your computer desktop to do things like record Zoom calls. I will also say, should have said, well, we're recording this, right? If we're not, you should all know I'm recording this using my Granola note-taking tool. And it's good to know that when you use a tool like Granola, it doesn't tell the people on the call that you're using it, which has some issues with transparency, but also like we should no longer be on Zoom calls and freely speak our minds, because there's no way really to know if somebody is recording you and you don't know it anymore. But in our meetings, we want to be transparent because that's part of our AI policy. So the team is going to have that tool, and they will, at the start of every meeting, they're going to set their phone down on the table between the participants and say, I'd like to record this with my meeting note taker so that I have a transcript to help me with follow up. What do you think about that? Are you okay with me doing it? And that way, it introduces a conversation about AI publicly, which I think is really important. Uh, but it also, like, having that tool, like, it becomes incredible for meeting follow up because Granola connects natively with Claude. So if you come over here, you can see that I'm connected. So when I get done with the meeting, I can just say, hey, was there any follow up that I need to track from that meeting that I was just in? Hey, can you, like, and I'll go and walk through how I have set up my personal operating system. Wes, you might have already seen this on my screen, but it looks like there's no existing Simple View MCP server, but they do have a little bit of information on their own GitHub account. So the way that I have created kind of a system that improves over time for me to work with Claude and is really what I recommend companies start thinking about rolling out, because this is how AI becomes the operating system for our work, this is called the para filing system. And I stole this from a webinar that I watched. I put the webinar, like it was a YouTube link that I put into Gemini, which can watch YouTube videos. And I said, I want to do this, but I don't know how. And it guided me step by step through setting this up. This is the para filing system. Project managers or product managers at like big technology companies, this is how they organize their work. So we have projects, areas, resources, and archives. Projects are things that are time bound, that they have at a certain point where the project is over. Areas are things that are not time bound, they're ongoing. So down here, you see one of the things I have is people. So it tracks people that I have conversations with so that every time I have a new conversation with somebody, I can make a note about it in Claude and it will add it to this people file. I think I have, yeah, the same thing with companies. So I can track conversations with individual companies. We have resources, which include things like AI generated images. Every time I make an image of myself using AI, Claude files it for me and then adds it to an index so that if it's building a PowerPoint for me, it knows what images it can pull in to make the PowerPoint look nicer. And then it also has our brand resources. So here, these are our logo files. And this is our brand identity guidelines. So whenever Claude builds a website for me, it knows how to make the website look like it's a Brand USA website. And so you could see this over here. I recorded myself yesterday when I was doing this keynote for, it was for the business events industry. So I have a little pin that's called a Plaud pin, Plaud. And I connected that to, like, I have an integration between that and Claude. So it pulls in the transcript of my talk. And then it has all of my slides because it built the slides for me. And so it is able to take my talk and turn it into a website that incorporates those images, and it has our logo at the top and it has like my contact information on it. And I'm going to be able to host this. Like right now, it's just saved inside of my filing system. And that filing system, it lives on my computer. So here you can see I'm on a Mac. And here we have the Research Hub AI tool because I was looking at this yesterday to see what files I wanted to open up to show everybody. So this is mirrored on the VS Code setup. So this and this is the same thing. Claude is just pointed at files on my computer. And so the brand identity becomes part of the resources that I use to do work. And then when I'm done with stuff, I can archive it down here. And Jacob, the reason that I use this setup instead of the Claude desktop app is it makes it easier for me to jump around between all of these different conversations. Whereas if I'm in the desktop app, you can still do it, but you have to come over. If I'm in co-work right here, I could start a conversation here and then you can leave and you can come back over here and you can move around. I find that it's a little bit less elegant to work in. But that said, you can absolutely, everything that I am talking about in VS Code, you can absolutely do in Cowork or over here in Claude Code. So,
And how do you move into VS Code? What is the process for actually going to the other interface?
so I'll show you. I have a website that I really use as a playground for stuff that I'm trying to figure out. So it's JanetteRoush.com, and you can go to resources. And on the resources link, really all you kind of need to do is open up Claude and paste this in and say, read this and tell me how to do it. But this also walks through what is a personal operating system? What are the tools that you need in order to do this? Like, I like this setup because it's not giving you access to every single thing on your computer. You're pointing it at a set of files on your computer. It could also be pointed at if you save your files in, GitHub or another code repository, you can point it there. You can also point it if you use Google Workspace at your Google Workspace account. Now, we use Box at Brand USA, and there is something funny about the way that Box syncs that I have to confess I don't 1,000,000% understand. but it means it's hard for me to use Box with this setup. And so I haven't really dived into that yet. I'm waiting because I assume that Anthropic is going to solve this problem for me. That if I'm just patient enough, Anthropic knows that for this to work longer term, it can't just be files on my computer. Businesses, right? We have shared drives. We need to all work on the same documents. I think Anthropic will figure out that question faster than I can create a workaround that it will, get rid of anyway. So that's what I have been banking on.
That makes sense. And I believe you shared that site with me, but that's fantastic. We'll definitely make sure that we're putting it. Would you mind if I share that website with others when I
Yeah, please.
upload this video? Okay, all right.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you could see here, like something that is nice in co-work that they've added recently. I say, Jacob, probably part of the issue too is that when I set this up, it was in the middle of January. Co-work didn't have all the bells and whistles that it has now. And so it's hard then now that I'm really liking doing the new system, it's hard for me to go back to co-work, even though it now has things like you can see the file that you're pointed at. And here for this webinar that I was doing, I wanted to show people like how can you set up this type of system. And so as a mock-up demo site, I'm doing a lot of work with Visit Beige County. So their current motto is "We're here too." Their tourism attractions include the giant spool of thread, and I've created a number of different documents. Like if I want to, like this is a fam trip itinerary that during the webinar on Monday, I created in real time. And this is using the brand identity for Visit Beige County to create, instead of giving a PDF file to fam trip participants, it actually makes more sense to give them a responsive web page because then if something changes, you don't have to tell them to delete, the PDF file and use this new one instead. You just update it on the website, and it's easier to read a website on your phone than it is to try to zoom in on a PDF file on your phone. So, and this type of thing is once you start to set up information in files where you are building on that information, then it becomes easier and easier to build this type of thing. So when you are first getting started, there's not going to be a lot of information saved in your file. So it'll be hard for it to be useful right out of the gate. But you could see here, I have a billion files and projects. And this is just it's been 4 months now because it was MLK weekend. I think I spent setting this up. It does, you do want to invest a little bit of time in setting up and figuring out the system. But then anytime that you find yourself doing a task that you repeat, you can build a skill to repeat that task. So every day I want to have an agenda of what I need to do. That is possible because I am able to make a number of tasks. And so it looks like I actually need to clean up a lot of my tasks. It's getting a little overweighted. But I've created a skill that is make a task. And a task is a markdown file. You're looking at this one here. And at the top, it has what is called YAML front matter. And it's just a little bit of code that when I run the today command, what that command does is read every single thing in my inbox folder to look at this YAML front matter to see what the due date is. And if the due date falls within one of the guidelines on my today skill, then it puts the information over here inside of my agenda. And then when I'm done with something, I tell it, hey, this is done. You should archive this now. And that's the part that clearly I'm a little mediocre at. And so I need to come up with a better system for doing that so I don't open up to a ton of overdue tasks every single day. But as I discover new things I want this to do, all I have to do is open up a new conversation and say, can you help me come up with a better system for letting you know when something is done so it gets archived? And we will work together in order to determine what that system is.
So you mentioned that you set this up over an MLK holiday weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So you, the non-programmer, the non-IT person, were able to create this particular system for yourself and pretty much your own personal operating system. And really the bulk of the work that you did happened during that weekend, correct? And then you're just
Mm-hmm.
continuing to build that. So
Exactly.
is there, I mean, I was looking at the list of people who are on here right now, and we're all, I think, data-minded individuals. Do you feel that, do you have to be a data-minded individual? Do you have to be an analyst to, then Denise jumping in, what does not have to know coding or programming to use VS Code or AI? And I think that's the challenge that I think we see with some of the team members, that beyond your basic, to your point, the texting, the message in the conversation, there's this fear, that leap that you need to take to try it. And I think that's where we're being held back right now. And I'm not saying we, all of us, but we, a lot of us. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what is your kind of parting comments, and what's the encouragement? What can we say to our teams, to even our IT, honestly, sometimes to say, hey, this is how you can support me for us all to grow and get to that next level?
I'd say start small. And certainly, if you have access to Claude, you don't need to make the first steps in VS Code. I would use CoWork and set up folders and point Claude at those folders. And then as you see, oh, it can write files for me, it can create presentations for me. Like generally, what IT or what other people on your team need to see is that aha moment that this is actually useful for work that they have to do today. And so it's about that, that kind of click of, oh, I get it now, with the comfort of you don't need to code. I'll say our CMO, so if you know Leah Chandler, she we did a agency meeting in January in Sarasota. And after that meeting, instead of circulating a Google Doc with notes, we circulated an interactive website that I made with here's everybody's next steps, and this is what we discussed, and it pulled out funny quotes from people. And she was like, "Oh, Janette, I get it now. Like this, oh, AI can do work now. I get it. How do I do this?" And this is when Claude Cowork still wasn't as good as it is today. So I set her up in VS Code. And I was like, "Oh God, like she's not she will tell you she is not a programmer or a coder." But we had an HQ week last week, and we hosted the agencies again. And this time she was the one circulating the notes that were put together with AI. So I like, it's not the easy answer, but just to say, like, I know it's possible because I am watching this happening in real time at my company. And it's like just talking to truly like the heads of your company to say, this is where work is going. In 18 months, this is how everybody is going to work. Everything is going to happen inside of AI, and we will expect information to flow into those AI tools. And if we're going to retain the staff who see this coming and you're not providing them that access, you have to make this available for them. If you want to be relevant in 18 months, we have to start moving in this direction. So, like, that's the point I've been making internally.
Thank you. And we have literally probably 30 seconds left on this call. It's been amazing. Thank you so much. I think some of us are probably still thinking, oh my God, how do I do this? But I think hopefully we can all build up some courage and look at your resources and tools, and maybe even poke you a little bit if you can give 5 minutes to answer
Absolutely.
some of the questions. But this has been phenomenal. The team on the online, thank you so much for being here. And hopefully you learned and you're walking away with something meaningful this time. And hopefully we will continue this conversation. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you very much.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.